Steam's Next Fest is over, and despite my computer's best efforts to destroy itself during that time, I did manage to play through 8 demos, which included some farming sims, some life sims, and, well, quite a few titles that just piqued my interest. So let's dive in. The first demo I played was for A New Leaf Memories, a game with a pretty messy development history, being published by a group that I highly dislike, but it's one of the few farming sims that was actually shown off, so here you go. In the demo, you're introduced to your farm and the basic mechanics such as planting crops, cutting trees, and mining stones. I'll be honest, there's really not much in the game to differentiate it from other farming sims, at least on the positive side. It does have quite a few sticking points to it though. A majority of the game is just empty land, and I don't mean that in a good way. It takes quite a bit of time to reach anything of note within the game. And there's also a decent chance that while you're walking around, you'll likely run into either an invisible wall or a 2-inch wall that blocks your way inexplicably. And even walking around in some of the areas of the game can be quite difficult. For example, this dock, which just seems to be thrown together. Overall, I would recommend skipping this one unless it gets heavily overhauled before release. Up next is Chilltown, another game from the same publisher. Right from the beginning, Chilltown borrows heavily from Animal Crossing New Horizons, even having a similar flight to their main island, just like Horizons did. The basic progression systems have all also been carried over to this game. My biggest gripe is that they seem to not really have learned anything about how or why Animal Crossing actually does things the way it does with these mechanics. Many of the characters that I met came off as more extremely annoying than endearing. The housing and building also felt like a sloppy system at times, but honestly, my biggest stopping point was the tutorials. If you didn't know, every single Animal Crossing has a tutorial system that they disguise as regularly playing through the game. Basically, the player is learning how to do stuff on their own with some light guidance from the game. Chilltown does the exact opposite of that freedom. They will lock you out of doing literally anything until you do the exact action that the devs want you to. This both drags down the experience of actually playing through the beginning of the game, which I'll remind you is most of what these demos are, and it also introduces problems like the one that I ran into, where a tool that they wanted me to use wasn't in the exact inventory slot that they thought it would be in. So it just locked me out of the entire game. I'll be clear right now, the bug is why I stopped playing, but honestly it had no bearing on me saying that I really wouldn't recommend this game either. Moving on from a single publisher that I don't like to a developer that I don't really like. Welcome to Garden Life. I've seen this game floating around a bit, and I will say it does look quite pretty. I will also say that this review will probably be the shortest of them all. Why? Because the game seems to lack anything at all beyond its graphics. The mechanics that are present are extremely shallow and seem to miss what players of the genre actually want from these types of games. For example, your garden is basically you plant, you water once, and then suddenly the flowers explode out, and yeah, that's basically it. Sadly, this is just another in a long list of games by this particular developer that will likely miss the mark of what they should be, or that are overly buggy and shallow. I am hoping that they end up proving me wrong with this one, but I cannot, in good consciousness, recommend this game either. So at this point, you're probably thinking, is he actually going to recommend any games? Maybe. This is actually the sequential order that I played them through, and at this point, I was actually also feeling slightly extremely annoyed with the games that I was playing. Why? Because to me, they all felt like small, poorly made attempts to cash grab in some way. So I decided to look outside the box a bit, and the next game that I played ended up just being one that I knew I would enjoy going in. I also ended up expanding beyond just looking at life and farming sims, because really there weren't that many, so I'm sorry about the lack of those to talk about. So the next game I played after all of that was Paper Trail, I'll be honest, this is the second demo for the game that I've tried. It's a pretty basic puzzle game where you're trying to traverse the world through folding paper over itself in order to create new paths, see new areas, and solve puzzles. It was my familiarity with the game that led to me playing it again after the last 3, and I'm actually glad that I did. The devs have seemed to have changed up their demo a bit, showing off different ways that you can think about the paper folding mechanic rather than just focusing on difficulty, which I think is a good step in the right direction for them. If you enjoy smaller puzzle games focused around a journey, Paper Trail just might be the game for you. For the next game, if you're one of those people who really enjoyed Palia's latest edition, The Tower, the next game might actually be right up your alley. If you didn't, then you'll want to avoid this one like the plague. Star Leaping Story is an indie 2D platformer built in the style of Celeste, so it's meant to be pretty difficult. The main mechanic of the game, which you use to progress, is, well, an air jump style, where you have 5 dashes in the air before you need to land and reset your jumps. Also in the style of Celeste, if you fail at any time, you reset to a position that was pretty close to you, although here they use a form of save points that you collect in order to determine where you land. There is a bit of a story to this game, but I'll be honest, it was really weird, so I found myself skipping through a lot of it. And with that, I will say the gameplay was pretty fun if you like challenges and platforming, although it can take some time to get used to the controls. If you've liked the content so far, please consider liking, subscribing, and telling me what upcoming games that you're looking forward to the most right now. For me, it's actually Super Mario Wonder, which releases Friday because Daisy is the best and she's available in that game. We have 3 games left, and the next is a bit more akin to a city builder. Horticulture is a small game where you're basically a god hired to change the lands, revitalize it, grow flowers, and make livable areas for different animals, all that fun stuff. The game does have a bit of an economy system to it, as well as an upgrade path, which should make it enjoyable to some who like this style of game. I, however, despite having played through quite a few city builders in my time, just couldn't find myself getting into this game. I don't think it was really anything that was the game's fault, though. It was a bit slower paced, maybe, than what I would really want, but I've also always struggled with more open-ended, directionless games, and while this one does have small goals, they really didn't help my brain stick with it. I'm a bit 50-50 on this one. I don't know if I can recommend it. It just wasn't a game for me, but there was nothing fundamentally wrong with it. For the next game, I stepped into a completely unknown territory for me. That game was Hairdresser Simulator. This is despite the fact that I usually get my hair cut maybe twice a year at most, and that I also know more about how to send my stuffed dog on vacation to Tokyo than I do about this profession in particular, so obviously this will be a very in-depth review. The game has you create your own salon of sorts, allowing you to buy your first property, clean it up, and decorate it in your own style. I'm boring, so I used brick. Then you wash, shampoo, cut, dry, and dye customers' hair, and run your own salon. The demo was, well, very sparse in how much you can do. There's obviously more to the game, but I just couldn't see it because demo. So what else is there to say? There are some small control problems at times, but honestly, if you like games like Power Wash Simulator, House Flipper, or anything like that, then this might be a fun game to check out. And on to my last game, Cupid Island. I'll be honest, I expected to absolutely hate this game coming into it. But, I didn't. I actually found myself liking it. I was able to start off by designing the most me-looking character that I've ever seen, and I set about in the world. Cupid Island is currently a pretty small game taking place in a tiny zone called Cupid Island. You are what I assume to be a recently demoted angel, because who reads stories, am I right? And you're tasked with making couples happy in order to extract their emotions for the continued survival of angels, or something like that. I don't know. This makes you extremely selfish, I should say. On your starting island, you can find the couples that you've coerced into falling in love against their will, and you can forcibly nurture their feelings for your own insidious purposes. Okay, off of that. The game does have a bit of a flash feel to it and comes off as really lighthearted. While it is rough around the edges, and there are a ton of small things that need to be fixed up before it's really in a state of release, such as the 3-day tutorial being way too long, the core ideas and gameplay loop are actually pretty fun. You, as I said, nurture couples. You talk to them, give them gifts, try to figure out their personalities, try to figure out work for them, and try to, well, make more people fall in love so that you can get more resources that you can then use to buy more things to do it all again. Pretty simple loop. I just wish that my character's 2D speaking art reflected the design that I chose. And that's all 8 game demos that I tried during Next Fest. I curse my computer. And here are the people that make this possible. Thank you for watching.